Welcome to In Focus. I'm your host, Jasmine Alvarez. Today we have Associate Professor of Public Relations at Cal State Fullerton and leading political communication and immigration studies scholar, Dr. Ricardo Valencia. Dr. Valencia's work examines the intersections of media and policy, dissecting complex political campaigns and their media narratives. He is now helping students do the same in his Politics in the Mediasphere course. Teaching the professional political communicators of the future, here is Dr. Ricardo Valencia. Welcome, Dr. Ricardo.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well.
For your time.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I have a couple questions,
Yes.
and I really wanted to get into what led you to pursue a career in media and politics.
I started as a reporter, right, a political reporter, and one thing that political journalists have that is unique is the subject or your study is not it's not open up there. Like if you cover things related to the judiciary, breaking news, disasters, it's very visible what's happening, what you cover, what the subject of your work. Well, political journalism is by nature trying to unveil things that are hidden, and that's informed me as a professor, but also as a reporter, like how interesting it is to discover things. But with the years, I've been also interested not only from the perspective of a journalist, but also from the perspective of politicians, right? Mm-hmm. Why they are doing what they're doing and how they measure the success of their actions, right? And I thought that lead me the question on how I can put together. This course was before devised and proposed by former Cal State Fullerton professor Jeff Brody. He had a more perspective of like journalistic coverage on politics. I just switched it to more political communications, like how we can teach our students how politicians think and how they can use those same tools and methods for other fields, right? And I have been fortunate to have students who are really curious, smart. Many of them come from the journalism concentration. Many of the brightest come from there. And they want to learn how to see political campaigns beyond journalism. Mm-hmm. They want to see how political campaigns are put together.
Right.
And that's what I'm trying to teach them, right? How to try to unveil the machinery, the threats that lay behind every political campaign.
Right. So is that what led you to wanting to teach?
Yeah.
In politics?
Yeah, that's what I wanted to teach. In a lot of ways, I always think professors are a little bit teaching and a little bit learning. Like when I wanna teach something, it's because I wanna learn something. Right? I don't think professors know it all. I have been very surprised all the time. I'm surprised all the time how my students are teaching me. And in one way was I wanna show my students from my experience as doing diplomatic, political communications, but also as my experience as a former journalist, how they can see the world in a different way. But at the same time, I want to learn more about the subject to teach it better in the future. Yeah, this is like that. Yeah,
that's an excellent response. Yeah. I'm curious, why do you think, or why do you believe that classes like these are so important to offer to the student body?
First, I think it creates critical thinking. Politics is important beyond political parties. Mm-hmm. And I think students have to be able to be critical of the journalistic coverage, but also be critical of politicians. I think that's regardless of, we all have our hearts and our positions, but I think you have to try to teach our students to be a kind of objective or try to detach from political discourses and try to see reality And secondly, I think political communications provides students from all concentration, all majors, set of tools, methods that can help them in any field, right?
Right.
Like stay on message, trying to understand media relations, um, budgets, how you're gonna build your own campaign, all those kind of things, which is my course about is is understanding politics critically, media and politics critically, but also how they can use communications and media when they are crafting a simulated political campaign. Well, I had one of my students already working for a real campaign, and he's using the class as a way to advise one of his friends who's running a campaign
Wow.
in the Council of Inglewood.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah,
Wow.
smart kids.
Wow, amazing. What role do you think media literacy plays in helping people thoughtfully engage in politics in their everyday lives?
Oh, I think they have to be able. I think media literacy help students to demystify media, right? Like it's not something that they can control, or there's something that is magical, or there's a conspiracy behind it. Just see it as a process, and understanding there's a lot of things behind media, and also be aware of. For me, media literacy is not all. People talk about disinformation, and we have to understand media literacy helps students to understand that there are certain actors who are trying to push half truth or lies for specific political and sometimes geopolitical purposes. Then they make them aware that some of the things they believe are common sense are just an attempt from very interested, nefarious sometimes, actors to put together a narrative and influence. Right. But that is something that I always believe is demystifying media. As in my classes too, I'm trying to demystify things like artificial intelligence, right? All these concepts seem so grandiose, untouchable, techy, geeky, and at the end, I always explains technology are great, but like we have been able to regulate our cars, right?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, before people didn't have, there weren't any regulation about cars. Now we regulate the velocity, we regulate all things. That can be happening also with artificial intelligence and all technology. Like that is something, the more important part of academia is helping our students to demystify things that looks like apparent truth.
Right. And what do you think a person could do to help improve their media literacy their media literacy skills? You know, not everyone has the privilege, unfortunately, to take your amazing class, but I think there's definitely some ways we can improve. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, there's several ways that people techniques, but one is where does this information coming from, right? And who is the information has facts or just facts that can be provable, right, or verified by a third party, and that is at the beginning to understand. And also, who's the people pushing for this without any criticism. I think if you ask who's the source of this, is a verifiable source, and who's behind this, you can have an idea what's the purpose of a specific pieces of information, right? And that is something and one thing is that just because somebody say it doesn't mean it's truth.
Right.
Yeah. And I think those 3 steps, we can go more. There are other mechanism frameworks for media literacy, but I think the first one is understanding the source of the information, what they are, what is their purpose, and if it can be verifiable by a third source. So yes.
Right, definitely. Thank you so much for that advice. I oftentimes hear people sometimes, they'll say, oh, I don't know enough about politics when wanting to engage in a political conversation. And even sometimes I find myself feeling the same way too. What advice can you offer to people who perhaps want to address this challenge?
First, I think we have to separate politics from partisanship, right? Politics is discussing what is good for society, right? And what is good for society sometimes will fall under partisan lines, sometimes no. And I think everybody has the possibility to propose, to show, to explain their vision of how the things have to be fixed or maintained. And that's politics, right? It could be complex and contradictory, but human beings are complex and contradictory. But I think when you don't want to talk about politics, eventually, if you don't want to deal with politics, politics will deal with you eventually.
That's very true.
And then, of course, if we enter in this extreme, polarized discussions about things, I mean, sometimes they are not even rational. They are just rants. But I think you don't need to have a PhD in political science to propose that something is not right and need to be fixed. And the solutions might be, and there's many solutions, and there will be, maybe the solution won't be the one you're looking for, but but it's the only possible solution in that time. I mean, politics is not just talking. I always say to my students, if we're going to talk about politics, only focusing on what Democrats and Republicans are saying, that's a boring thing, right? It's about beyond that. That's just politicians, career politicians have their own things, but the politics has been since the times of the Greeks, in 5,000 years ago was. The idea was that everybody had the right to discuss the problems of the city, of the state, and offer solutions, right?
Right, and that's the idea, bringing, in a way, even though you might have a separate party, right, we can still come together to offer solutions.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
great. That's great.
Solutions are really, sometimes are not black and white, right?
Yeah, that's very true. What trends are there any trends, should I say, that you've noticed in political consumption, from the younger generations?
Oh, yes. I always ask my students first, I'm trying to be a buffer generation between your generation and older generations, because there's older generation think you don't really care about politics, and younger generations might be thinking that the old people don't get them. I believe what young people get, political communication now, they get their cues from social media, but also through personal networks, right? And I think the whole purpose of political campaigns, presidential campaigns in this case, are trying to build content that it can be easily replicable in social media. But social media not only about, I'm not talking only the Instagram, Twitter, X. I'm talking also that social media also is replicated in social networks of people, right? People are sharing messages. And I think that's why my students, especially TikTok, that are getting information from TikTok, and they have points, very valid points, and they are being aware or more sensitive to a lot of things. For example, one of the issues that I have really makes me aware of how social media has shaped many of the visions or the conflict in Palestine and Israel, right? How my students are being able to get information that before was difficult to get, right? And I think that is the uniqueness of social media, the uniqueness of our time, but also the information for political communication to be effective, it has to resonate with young people, the identities, with visions of that make sense to them, and that's what is happening. Like is understanding instead of just they are getting young people are getting political messages from a diverse sources, but they are similar in the meaning they want to give it, right? Yeah, so I think that is a very interesting perspective that they are really well informed about the world. Not the word articulated in the way of people want to, but they will articulate it in the way they are, the way they can understand it. And they're very political, but not in the way people want them to see political. They are young people are trying to bring and form their own ways to engage politically and with reality. I think it's very interesting to see this.
Yeah, definitely. And in line with talking about these younger generations, what do you think, or what are your thoughts, or what impact do you think does the Gen Z voter bloc have on elections?
Oh, very good question. I think Gen Z generations are trying to create their own path using tools from the past. But I believe Gen Z generations are, what I'm trying to say is Gen Z generation are using tools and visions that were extreme before and now naturalized now, right? And I think they will approach political communication, media, from the lenses of identity, from the lenses of I belong to this group, I feel personal connection with this. It means it resonates to me. It makes sense with my reality, and I think that is becoming more important than just the idea of ideas. Is the emotional part of politics that that Gen Z is bringing, making it more possible. They have been always emotional in politics and communication, but I think now is like one of the main lenses in which Gen Z are looking at politics, right? It makes sense to me, but also it resonates. It makes me feel part of something. It makes me feel that I belong to something larger. Right. Because for all the great things that social media has brought, one of the things is also that many of new generations are not having strong ties because a lot of things are happening online. And Gen Zs are trying to reveal personal ties in a different iteration, right? I was reading a few days ago about how dating apps are like falling apart. Like Gen Z are not dating; they're using tools. They're trying to find dates in different ways. I'm an old millennial. Then I was thinking, oh, that the romantic media was old-fashioned stuff for people over 40 now, and that tells you a little bit what's happening. The Gen Z wants wants to make sense of politics through personal connections, but also through emotions and sensitivities and they own that. They want to be seen, and they want to be perceived as that they're invested in something, right? Yeah.
Definitely. I think being part of a community.
Be part of a community is belonging. Yeah, it can start in social media, but I think eventually new generations will start to meet in person, right? They can be, like now, see my students, like they might be here taking 3 online classes, but they want to be here. Yeah. Because they don't want to be at home, right? And that is something that all generations don't understand, because we come from a generation who had 0 social media, and they have been getting more social media, digital media. But Gen Z come from the other extreme. Social media all the time, but they are trying to come to a world where geographic location, personal ties are becoming important, right? I think I have a student who was the president of eSports, and their meetings were in person. You would think, why they don't do the meetings on Zoom? And I have students for other clubs who were like, well, why don't you do it on Zoom? And we don't want to do it on Zoom. We do everything on Zoom. We want to meet in person, right? And I think that is something that it will be happening with new generation. They will look for for physical things, interactions, not everything. Some things will be online, but it would be this connection of hybridity in terms of, is it making sense? I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And a last question for you. In your opinion, how could media be used as a tool to promote a positive change?
I think media has the possibility of making people think about things that they haven't paid attention. What it has in media study called agenda setting the agenda of discussions, still is powerful. And I think for change, media need to bring issues that might not be are relevant, but they are not popular, right? And I think bringing issues that are not popular but they are relevant, for example, housing, right? Healthcare, if what is there are things that might not be in the top of mind of journalists or in general public, but they are important to be addressed because it depends. Our livelihood depends on those issues, and I think setting agenda not only be driven by the virality, by politicians and conflict will always, from the beginning of the history of mass media, is the one that bring more ratings, and but journalism, media, people who work with media has to bring issues that are important for society, even if sometimes society thinks are not the most popular issue, because otherwise we will be talking about these three things that people are really we wouldn't talk about poverty. We were talking about all about our Dodgers going to the World Series, which are important, but there are other things that are important to discuss. I think that bringing issues that are forgotten and that are relevant for our society, I think that could be something important for media, is a function of media that can work perfectly.
Well, thank you so much. That was an excellent response to all of our questions. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Valencia. That's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Ricardo Valencia, once again for being here with us today. Until next time, I'm your host, Jasmine Alvarez, and thank you for watching In Focus.